Good evening and welcome along. It's Thursday night, the 17th of December 2020. My name's Toby Lepati Mesme and this is another edition of Mesme Politics. That's right. Over the next half hour or so, I will be dissecting all the biggest stories of the day, of the last 24 hours in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective. That's what we do. Sort of our USP. No one else particularly does it, so in this sort of format and this regularly, of course there are other left-wing media outlets, and I would encourage you to support all of those as well. But no one does it quite the way we do it. Coming up on tonight's show, stimulus talks in the US, an update. Is there a sign of some progress? Are the American people going to get the help that they need? Or will corporate hegemony and indeed government gridlock doom them to not a particularly Merry Christmas? In a few minutes, we'll be talking about Unicef now stepping in to feed poor kids in Britain, because that's the state. Is this the state that Tory rule has left us in? What's going on? What does it all mean? And of course, we'll also be hearing Jacob Rees-Mogg's comments on that. Yes, I know, Jacob Rees-Mogg, famous crusader on child poverty. We'll be hearing from him because he's decided to put his foot in his mouth again. And top of the show, I want to talk to you about the tier review. The government have reviewed where we are with the tiers. Confusingly, they already did an emergency announcement, but now even more. And spoiler alert from Matt Hancock, it's not great news. And, well, the shit show continues. It's all on the way. Get in touch at any point. Please do come and say hello. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talk about. You are the backbone of this. You are listening to this. I want you to contribute to it. The left has always been a broad church. I want the plurality of perspectives wherever possible. Please and thank you, because I think, I'm going to get plenty of things wrong. I'm going to call things wrong. I'm going to predict things wrong. But you can probably nudge me a bit more in the right direction on certain things. And then when I am wrong, you can have the smugness of going, told you so. I was right, you were wrong, because that's how it goes. Hopefully I'll call some things right, though. That's always the hope. All right. Where were we? So, COVID tiers. The COVID tier system in Britain is being reviewed. Where are we with all this? What exactly does it all mean? Well, I'll quote this from a news article. Matt Hancock has revealed which areas of England will move tier allocations this weekend due to local infection rates of COVID-19. This was speaking in the House of Commons today.
In the southeast of England, cases are up 46% in the last week. Hospital admissions are up by more than a third. In the east of England, cases are up 2/3 in the last week, and hospital admissions are up by nearly half. It is therefore necessary to apply Tier 3 measures across a much wider area of the east and southeast of England, including Bedfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Peterborough, the whole of Hertfordshire, Surrey with the exception of Waverley, Hastings and Rother on the Kent border of East Sussex, and Portsmouth, Gosport and Havant in Hampshire. These changes will take effect from 1 minute past midnight on Saturday morning. And I know that Tier 3 measures are tough, but the best way for everyone to get out of them is to pull together, not just to follow the rules, but do everything they possibly can to stop the spread of the virus.
Okay, so the state of affairs is not brilliant. We're already hitting case levels that we were at nationally a few weeks before the government U-turned and went into a second lockdown, which they promised they wouldn't do. Someone says Unicef news is pretty damning to the government. Yes, indeed it is, and we will be talking about that next. Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Health Secretary. What's he got to say on the matter?
Yesterday, England reported over 23,000 cases, the highest numbers in a month. Hospital admissions on 14th of December were the highest since 16th of April. The number of people in hospital with COVID is now the highest since the 22nd of April. The number has risen 20% since the end of lockdown. If it goes up by another 20%, we are back at the same peak we saw in April. These numbers should be sounding all the alarm bells there are, and it's why clinicians are pleading with him to put robust arrangements in place to keep people safe through Christmas. We saw in Canada and in the US huge spikes in infections following the Thanksgiving. We will see a spike here. This isn't about cancelling Christmas. Santa will still deliver his presents, but is he really telling us that allowing indoor mixing of 3 households across regions and generations for 5 days is sensible, given the virus is raging with such ferocity at the moment? And the devastating tragedy is that those who will be most impacted by this virus spreading through the easing are those who will be at the front of the queue for the vaccine in the next month or two. So will he look again at the Christmas arrangements?
Good from Jonathan Ashworth there. Always pretty consistent with his criticisms of the government, always pretty steadfast in what he's saying. So what to make of everything that's happened here? Well, as Andy Burnham has pointed out again, the North is getting treated differently. That is the inescapable reality we're currently faced with, because cases get to a certain point in the South, and suddenly, we're all on lockdown. They get to that point in the North is penalised and ignored and sidelined, as it has been since we came out of national lockdown, really. Since then, it's been a story of levelling down. The North is held to different standards, it's treated in a different way, it's, as I say, it's penalised, it's an afterthought in policy making. Heaven forbid we shut down and cripple businesses in London, but in post-industrial areas in the North, go on ahead. Cities in the North, Leeds, fine, we don't care about Leeds, do we? This is the attitude, the top of government, because the so-called Conservatives are running one of the most centralised, top-down, commanding governments that we've ever had. They were all about personal freedom and all this. They are not devolving anything. What's the point of conservatism if you're not letting local areas deal with things in local way? It's completely ideologically inconsistent. These people are greedy for power. They've centralised the operation far more than any Labour government would have done in the same place. Okay? Let that sink in. The Labour government would not have centralised any of this to the same extent. The Tory government have owned top-down centralisation. The party that told people who felt left behind, who felt isolated because of a centralised proposition in Westminster, that they were their voice, the voice of the regions. Well, not so much. It's a couple of white men in a bunker in Whitehall making U-turns that even I could have foreseen. Banging their heads against the wall. Own goals, political own goals, the likes of which we've never seen. We've never had governance this inept. Well, at the same time, no one realises it because they're all just saying the same thing and patting each other on the back. And then going and repeating the same mantra on the news every day. Just the same lines. And then another day, the lines change. It's like a combination between something dystopian in George Orwell and The Matrix. It's just, these people don't come across as human beings. Obviously they are, but they just don't say anything original. The policy here, in terms of the tier system, should be opposed the way this has been done, because it's regressive and it's levelling down, okay? Myself and the Tory MPs who are now getting really hot under the collar because everything they said about the tiers is being proved right and everything the government said about the tiers is being proved wrong, I disagree with them in that I believe we do need lockdown measures, but we need to handle these things with proper support and a much more egalitarian approach that actually safeguards the local economies. What they're arguing is just keep the whole thing open. Not sound, epidemiologically or economically, if you actually look at how people's behaviours change in the face of rising cases. They're not just going to go, the only thing stopping people going to the pub isn't lockdown. They're also not going to want to go to the pub if the NHS is overwhelmed, even if they're allowed to. Full stop. Your example there is, even though the Christmas guidelines were really lax, one in four people, maybe max, we're gonna go back to normal. That's 75% of your clientele if we apply that logic to a pub. But the fact remains, we have common cause in the fact that myself, Labour MPs on the left opposed to this, ERG-type lockdown skeptics on the Tory right, we all agree that the way this is done is it's regressive. It is the antithesis of levelling up. We are levelling down right now. And the whole thing needs a complete rethink. We said it wouldn't work. We saw it not work. The same mistakes as last time are being made. Clearly, the lockdown didn't teach us any lessons. And now, it's just, frankly, it's not working. The tier system is not working. Cases are rising. Only like one place in the entire country has gone down to tier 1. It's the Isle of Man and like one or two other places. That's it. Over nearly 70% of the country are in tier 3. Nearly 70% of the country are basically in the lockdown we supposedly came out of at the beginning of this month, and that number appears like it may grow. So we've still got areas stuck in tier 3 that won't come out. Tier 2 is wishy-washy and useless because we're not testing efficiently, and tier 1 is a chocolate fireguard. So you have tier 1, that's exponential rising case. You have tier 2, that's slow rising case. You have tier 3, that's stasis. So the logical conclusion is we're heading down the barrel of another lockdown, unless, and this is deja vu because I was saying this whole thing before the second lockdown. And I might be saying this before the fourth lockdown, after the third lockdown. That's how deja vu this all is. But the more things clog up, the harder it's going to be to vaccinate people, right? That's the first, if we want the vaccinations to work, we have to not overwhelm the health service. And just looking at this, the state of it now, I am, either stuff is going to overflow or we're going to go into another lockdown. Or, as I say, a drastic shift in policy. I would encourage everyone to basically worry and act with worry and caution in mind, okay? Please be careful. Don't be scared. There's no need to panic. We've all been through this, but I would advise you to be more cautious, right? Because we don't want another lockdown. We don't want this to overflow. Let's try and do what the government is clearly not doing. The responsibility is on the government. I am never going to blame the British public, because it's not true. They're going to try and scapegoat the British public. Much of the British public blame the British public, but they're wrong in doing so. The complete lack of coherent guidance and leadership has someone like myself, who immerses myself day in, day out in these details, still scratching my head about what the rules in tier 2 are sometimes, right? So what do you think people who are having to work, who are having to feed their kids, what are they? People in a far less privileged position to myself, and with far less time on their hands, right? To even consider thinking about politics. How are they meant to grasp it if I can't grasp it? I've got all the time to study it. They haven't. They've got to work. They're not going to know what's going on in tier 2. And on top of that, I know messaging isn't everything, but the messaging is the biggest chocolate fireguard of them all. On one positive, anti-lockdown forces, in terms of public opinion, have not gained a foothold yet, in the way we fear they might. They still might, but as far as I can see right now, anti-lockdown forces remain on the fringe. There was a little bit of pushback against lockdown in terms of polling, but it's basically stasis now. Most people are still urging the government to go further than they are. Therefore, we are okay. Nothing drastic. There's not, as long as public consent is there, that's positive. But it does beg the question, why is the government not doing something? And maybe the answer to that is that part of their base are the minority of fruitcakes that don't believe in coronavirus. Maybe that's the answer. Although, potentially, the minority of fruitcakes who don't believe in coronavirus make up a solid chunk of their backbenchers, and that might be why they're not feeling willing to do anything. Okay, next story of the day. Unicef is now feeding British kids. That's where we are. That is the state of play right now. That is not a joke. So, here's the article from The Independent. The UN's Child Protection Wing will for the first time intervene to support those at risk of hunger in the UK following the unprecedented impact of COVID-19 on vulnerable communities. Unicef has put its funding behind a scheme designed to provide breakfast boxes to 1,800 families over the course of the Christmas holidays, marking the first emergency response in the UK by the organisation since it was founded, get this, in 1946. It comes as charitable groups and appeals, including the Independents Help the Hungry campaign, work to tackle surging rates of food poverty across the UK. UNICEF's £25,000 grant will see food distributed through schools to vulnerable children in Southwark, South London, across the winter break by charitable group School Food Matters. The UN agency warned that the pandemic is the most urgent crisis affecting children since the Second World War. Anne Kettley, director of programmes at UNICEF, said this is UNICEF's first ever emergency response within the UK, introduced to tackle the unprecedented impact of the corona crisis and reach the families most in need. The grant for School Food Matters will address the gap in current provision for children, providing approximately 1,800 children with breakfast bags during the school holidays, the Christmas holidays, and February half term. This funding will help build strong communities as the impact of the pandemic worsens, but ultimately a longer term solution is needed to tackle the root causes of food poverty so no child is left to go hungry. Angela Rayner has got a good line on this. She says, the fact that UNICEF is having to step in to feed our country's hungry children is a disgrace, and Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak should be ashamed. We are one of the richest countries in the world. Our children should not have to rely on humanitarian charities that are used to operating in war zones and in response to natural disasters. Charities and businesses across the country have done a brilliant job stepping in where the government has failed, but it should never have come to this. And I think we can all agree, it should never have come to this. The fact it has come to this is utterly, utterly shameful. And I want to make clear, this is not because of the corona crisis per se. Yes, the corona crisis has tipped it over the edge, but the reason that these problems were already existent, this didn't spring out of nowhere. We weren't on a great footing in January, and UNICEF is stepping in because suddenly the great, kind welfare state of Britain has shattered. No, we were already in dire straits. We've been in dire straits for years. We were already doing pretty poorly in terms of the appalling benefits, sort of cruelty under New Labour. But that was stepped up to immeasurable, hundreds of thousands of deaths caused by austerity under the Tories since 2010. This is the result of Tory governments. Make no mistake. Where does the blame go for this? It doesn't go to COVID. COVID was the catalyst. The groundwork for this, okay, the hollowing out of the state, must be laid firmly at the door of the Tory government and their enablers, Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, who cheered on the policy and backed their party vociferously in 2010 and in 2015. Now, we're behind in every sense during this crisis. That cannot go amiss. We have been behind on how we've done testing, we've been behind on lockdown numbers. Our neighbours in Europe have done better than us. Many countries in the third world have done better than us. The Far East has done better than us. Russia has done better than us. And I'm not advocating for us to be the best at everything. I'm not an English nationalist. But the fact that we are where we are tells us there are serious, serious problems in the way our state and our country and our organisations responds to things. And I'd say a pretty solid chunk of that, if not all of it, probably all of it, can be placed at the door of austerity. Okay? Austerity, the scourge of austerity, is what caused one of the most disastrous responses to COVID-19 in the world. That's where we are right now. Not even the most pessimistic would have expected this at the beginning. The regressive response to these things is just shocking. The regressive response to child poverty, now coming from the right, is basically the get out of jail free card for the Tories. Now faced with a bit more blue-collar elements to their base. These are people who do not want children in poverty. What they're going to do, and we've already seen examples of it, is basically two things. First of all, put the onus on personal responsibility, which is wrong and misguided. We could do a whole episode on that. But they're going to do that, which will resonate with a certain subset of their base. Quite a lot of people in Britain buy into that lie. But at the same time, the regressive approach, the two-pronged regressive approach, is they're going to engage in a levelling down rather than a holistic, let's help everyone. They're going to say, right, we're cutting the foreign aid budget. Right, people are scrounging. They've got flat-screen TVs. They're on benefits. They're going to whip up hatred and resentment and say, actually, we're taking care of things fine. People are abusing the system. And the old Tory playbook, except they're going to emphasise, look at us, we speak for the hard workers, and anyone who says otherwise is just, in it to enrich themselves off the back of the taxpayer. And instead of, look, we're going to help everyone, it is going to be quick, grab that crumb before that other person grabs that crumb, knock them out before they get the crumb. Appealing to the Tories are very much appealing to the worst instincts of humanity. Now, that's a very strong statement, but it's true. If you look at their strategy, the culture war strategy as a whole, the British right and the Tory party that have embraced many of the tenets of the radical rights policy prospectus, especially socially, are essentially saying, we're going to appeal to your darkest, most selfish instincts rather than the sense of community we've built up during COVID-19. Tory policy has failed. It didn't have to be this way. This is the failure of governance. No one's going to point this out. I certainly don't see the Labour front bench or Keir Starmer pointing this out. But this is austerity. We already heard talk of more austerity, and we'll be talking next year about the new budget, about what Sunak's going to be doing, but the door of blame for most of this is austerity. It did not have to be this way. It was caused. And now, in terms of what's Jacob Rees-Mogg's hopefully humbling and sorrowful response, or at least neutral, to Unicef having to treat us like a third world country.
I think it's a real scam.
Not that there's anything wrong with being a third world country. They've done far less horrific things than our country, put it that way.
I think it's a real scam.
We've lost Jacob Rees-Mogg. No. It's been removed. We had a clip of Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's been removed. Give me a moment and I'm going to try and get that back, because that was definitely worth listening to. Jacob Rees-Mogg. Don't you love it when the clip you had queued up, I literally found it earlier in the day, is just gone. So maybe Jacob Rees-Mogg had it taken down. Hang on. Here we go. So Zara Sultana, absolute stellar Labour MP, asks Jacob Rees-Mogg about UNICEF feeding hungry children in the UK. What's he got to say?
Speaker, for the first time ever, UNICEF, the UN agency responsible for providing humanitarian aid to children, is having to feed working class kids in the UK. But while children go hungry, a wealthy few enjoy obscene riches. From Tory donors handed billions in dodgy COVID contracts to people like the Leader of the House, who is reportedly in line to receive an £800,000 dividend payout this year. So will he give government time to discuss the need to make him and his super-rich chums pay their fair share so we can end the grotesque inequality that scars our society?
Mr. Speaker,
I don't like to personalise too much in the House, and I do understand you've got to get things on the record, but I do want to show at least some kind of Christmas spirit at the moment. Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's a real scandal that UNICEF should be playing politics in this way, when it is meant to be looking after people in the poorest, the most deprived countries in the world, where people are starving, where there are famines and where there are civil wars, and they make cheap political points of this kind, giving, I think, £25,000 to one council. It is a political stunt of the lowest order. But what has this government done about child poverty? We are committed to our manifesto pledge to reduce child poverty. We've expanded free school meals to all 5 to 7-year-olds, benefiting 1.4 million children. We doubled free childcare for eligible working parents and will establish a £1 billion childcare fund, giving parents the support and freedom to look after children. We're spending £400 million of taxpayers' money to support children, families and the most vulnerable over winter and through 2021. Since 2010 to 2018-19, there are 100,000 fewer children in absolute poverty in this country. This is a record of successive conservatism, and UNICEF should be ashamed of itself.
This is absolute nonsense. Anyone who wants to look at the homelessness rates, the child poverty rates, and the state of play now knows that people's standards of living were infinitely better before the Tories came to power than after they've come to power. The most vulnerable in society have been hit relentlessly by this government since 2010. It's absolutely shameful from Jacob Rees-Mogg. And I repeat here, there would be no Jacob Rees-Mogg on the left. If there was a character as bizarre and offensive as Jacob Rees-Mogg on the left, they would have been excommunicated and pillared by the media to the extent that they'd never want to show their face in public again within minutes. If there was someone like that on Jeremy Corbyn's front bench. But they get a free pass because they're in the Tory party and they can be an oddball and no one cares. It's a very thoroughly unpleasant man. Okay. And I don't want to make it too personal because it is Christmas, but that man is just a disgrace. Now, final story of the day. Over to the US, finishing on a little bit more of a positive note. Of course, remember, UNICEF, they're all in on the Marxist conspiracy. That's obviously... Get ready for that next. Marxist organisation, UNICEF. Next step in the culture wars. So stimulus talks in the States, we talked about this yesterday. But there has been some improvement in how things are looking. Just to read this to you. The new proposal, this is what we're heading towards, is the latest iteration of a $908 billion plan that was first revealed on December the 1st. On Monday, a group of bipartisan senators split it off into two separate bills. The larger $748 billion package for areas of funding with the most widespread support. The other breaks the two prickliest issues, state and local funding and liability protections, into a second $180 billion package. So it appears top US Democrats and Republicans have taken the kernel, the $748 billion kernel, as a foundation. That seems it's left $152 billion for stimulus checks if negotiators want to hit a $900 billion cap, or $160 if they don't. A maximum of $1,200 per eligible adult and $500 per qualifying child. These are the ideas being thrown around. Obviously, the CARES Act passed in March gave $600 per week. If the final number came out closer to $300 billion, then there could conceivably be enough money in a $152 allotment to cover a $600 per person check if the stimulus payment qualifications stay roughly the same. Obviously, what we want to see is full stimulus checks. Go big. 2,000 is the figure I've heard talk of, and that's what I'd aim for. We also want to see aid for states. This is not helping the states enough. It will not starve off austerity. All you're doing is you're forcing the states to implement austerity rather than the federal government. The federal government is reneging on its responsibility to prevent that. This is improvement. The immunity for corporations in the middle of COVID is being removed. Democrats must never let that pass. Fight to the end to stop that passing. And like I say, go to the public and go, have you seen? They won't pass relief because they want to put this in there. State and local funding is vital, but if we can get this over the line with some sort of stimulus check in it, it's not clear right now. If we can get some sort of stimulus, some money in people's pockets, right? Just get it out of the way and deal with the rest in January. I would say just sign the damn thing. This whole system is corrosive and useless. People know the political system isn't working for them, and this is why. Gridlock And politics are preventing us getting what people need out to them. And I say shame on all of them, because they know what's going on. They know they're going to have to look their constituents in the eye, but they're so cowardly they'll just blame the other side. And you know what? Politics is so antiquated in the States, it'll probably work. Progressives need to be harsh with Nancy Pelosi coming out of this. They need to refuse. I'm endorsing this position. A few people have. Many people have been too scared to. They need to prevent Nancy Pelosi from becoming Speaker of the House. They have the votes to do it. They need to prevent Nancy Pelosi from becoming Speaker of the House unless she commits to working with them on various policy proposals and bringing Medicare for All to the floor for a vote, and then we can hear them all explain why they're going to vote against healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think Medicare for All would pass. That being said, they're going to have to answer to their constituents on that. So, and then that opens the door to a Tea Party movement of the left, if you like, although hopefully less crankish, in 2022. That's what we're going to have to do. We need an insurgent force against these people, because these corporate Democrats are not suitable, they're not sufficient, and they need to be kicked out of office. And hopefully, bit by bit, that will be done. Feeling particularly ruthless tonight, I know. Just a quick clip for you at the end from Representative Pramila Jayapal on MSNBC talking about the COVID relief stimulus checks. And, she will summarise the progressive position of her colleagues in the squad far better than I will. She's a brilliant representative, brilliant congresswoman, strong voice. She's spoken out in favour of... basically spoken out amid accusations of all manner of things for the rights of Palestinian people, which is excellent. And something most people are too scared to do in the States, let's be honest. Let's have a listen to what she's got to say. Brilliant, brilliant representative. And the future of the Democratic Party in many ways, people like this.
This is better than the pathetic offer put forward by Senate Republicans that did not include any direct payment to individuals or help for small businesses. It was a plan designed to indemnify corporations against being sued if they brought their people back in ways that were unsafe. How satisfied are you with what you're hearing about a deal right now?
Well, Ali, as you know, what we did in the Progressive Caucus is we united and we said we are not going to vote for a deal that doesn't have direct relief, money in people's pockets. And to us, that is direct relief checks and it is expanded unemployment assistance. Those are the two things that are the most immediate in terms of getting relief to people who have been suffering. It's been 9 months since we passed the CARES Act, and Republicans have held up any kind of relief over and over again. So we are really thrilled that 48 hours ago there was nothing in the package, and then the offer was, well, we'll put some relief checks in, but we're going to strip it from unemployment. We said no way, and now at least we've got this, which $600 per person. So that would be, if you're a family of four, that would be $2,400. So that's $600 for an adult, $600 for a dependent child. And I think that at least that is a little bit that gets people across the line, you know, at this moment when a snowstorm is hitting and people don't know if they can keep the heat on. There are single moms who are writing me every day and saying, I don't know what to do if I'm kicked out of my home.
See, there you go. That's called representing your constituents. That's called standing up for people, and that's called results. And that's what we want to see. There you go. Excellent. Couldn't have said it better myself. I told you she'd summarise it better than me. And yeah, that just about wraps up the show, doesn't it? So thank you for joining me. Hope you've enjoyed. We are back with you at 7 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time tomorrow evening for your Friday edition of Mesme Politics. I've been Toby Lepeti-Mesme, bringing you the day's politics in the UK and the US from a leftist perspective. Someone says, my daughter teaches children whose fridges will be empty this Christmas. Exactly. This is not how a civilised, remotely wealthy society should be dealing with itself. Something has gone critically wrong. We're in dire straits. What's the difference between us and those countries where there are famines, and those countries in the third world where people are starving every day. Well, we're the 6th richest country in the world. We should be able to take care of all our children, and actually plenty of children around the world on top of that. But no, we can't even deal with our own children. And at the same time, we're slashing the budget for children overseas, which is an excellent scapegoat, but does absolutely nothing for children in Britain. Just as raising the military budget exponentially does nothing for it does nothing for veterans that are sleeping on the streets as the result of policies enacted by the Tory government. Now, as for stimulus checks, again, that's good. We've seen a remotely positive thing happen. And as I say, strip out the immunity clauses, pass what you can, pass the damn thing. All sides are to blame here. Of course, the GOP are particularly insidious and, commit foul acts of legislative gridlock. But the Democrats are just as beholden to corporate interests. Those immunity clauses were almost pioneered, word for word, from Andrew Cuomo's efforts in New York. You know, a lot of the Democrats are basically just centre-right. They're Tories, in a way. These are not our friends. Nancy Pelosi is a Margaret Thatcher Democrat. Why should people like AOC and Ilhan Omar vote to make her Speaker of the House with her reduced majority unless she acquiesces to their demands? You know, you've got her. Why don't you use the leverage? And please do. Party unity, my arse. We need to see results, or there's no point in electing people like the Squad and other progressive voices to Congress. Let's see Jamal Bowman, AOC, Ilhan Omar actually speak about this, deal with it, and they do sound like they're going in that direction. But let's hear the unspoken thing: we won't vote for Nancy Pelosi unless she delivers results. Let's see it. Alright, thanks for listening. I'll see you very soon.